The water didn't wait. It didn't care about your theology. It didn't stop to ask if the campers believed in guardian angels. It didn't pause for prayers or discriminate based on denomination. It just came, fast, loud, and final. Before we go any further, I need to say this clearly. I live in Texas. These are my people. I don't take what happened in the Hill Country lightly, not for a second. The loss is unspeakable. Lives shattered, families grieving, futures erased in a matter of minutes. This isn't an abstract thought experiment or a theology class debate. It's real, raw heartbreak. And I know there are people, maybe you, asking, where was God? Right now, in real time. I grieve with you. I sit with the questions too. This episode isn't meant to explain away pain. It's meant to hold space for it. But now we're left asking the question that ruins dinner parties and shatters Sunday school platitudes. Where was God when the water took people away from us? I'm Theology Jack, your guide in exploring life's biggest questions and mysteries. Here's the part where we're supposed to say something comforting, something like, God's ways are higher than ours, or they're in a better place, or my personal favorite, the theological equivalent of duct tape over a bullet wound, everything happens for a reason. But no, we're not doing that today. Let's start with this. If you believe in a God who could have stopped the flood but didn't, what kind of God is that? I mean, picture it. Camp Mystic, a river rising 26 feet in 45 minutes. Cabins full of kids asleep in their bunks, warnings set out, but not fast enough. Parents driving hours, praying that they're not already too late. Some of them were. If God knew that flood was coming, if God could have whispered to the atmosphere, hold back, if God had the power to push back that wall of water and just didn't. We're talking about a God who either didn't care or couldn't be bothered. Either way, that God should resign. But maybe, just maybe, we've got the wrong job description taped to God's office door. See, most of us grew up with the control room God. You know the one. Big cosmic switchboard, watching everything like an unblinking surveillance system. He's got the power, the plan, and apparently the spreadsheet. Every flood, authorized. Every cancer diagnosis, signed off. Every child swept away, folded neatly into God's greater purpose. I used to believe in that God until I realized that God makes for a really bad therapist and an even worse parent. Because look, if you or I had the power to stop a flood and we didn't, we'd be in prison, not praised in a worship song. So maybe the God worth believing in doesn't control the weather. Maybe God doesn't coerce nature or people. Maybe divine power looks less like a puppet master and more like love itself, present, persuasive, but never forceful. What if God's not the one pulling the strings, but the one weeping with us in the mud? Here's where it started to shift for me. Picture this, a river, but this time it's not physical, it's metaphorical. A flood of grief, of unknowing, of theological wreckage. And in that flood, I don't see a throne. I see a figure waist deep in the water, arms outstretched, not to part the sea, but to hold us as we drown in our questions. Because maybe God's power isn't in prevention. Maybe it's in presence. I get it. This makes people really uncomfortable and nervous. We want a God who shows up with sirens and a lightning bolt, not one who hands out towels after the fact. We want rescue, not solidarity. But here's the paradox. If God could stop all the tragedies, then every tragedy becomes God's decision. And that makes God the villain. So what's the alternative? A God who is love. And real love, honest, non-coercive, wildly free love can't control everything. It can influence, invite, inspire, whisper, and yes, even grieve, but it doesn't override. Because the moment it does, it stops being love. Now, before you throw your Bible at the screen, let's talk about Job. The man loses everything: kids, health, status, and his friends try to explain away with theology. You must have sinned. God has a plan. Suck it up. It's divine wisdom. But God shows up in a whirlwind and basically says, "You don't know Jack." Even God seems sick of our theological gymnastics. Or how about Jesus sobbing outside Lazarus' tomb, knowing full well resurrection's coming, but still breaking down in tears? Why? Because death sucks. God knows it. If God is revealed most clearly in Jesus, then this is huge. Even God doesn't dodge grief. Even God doesn't shortcut pain. God doesn't float above the tragedy. God bleeds in it. So maybe the flood isn't proof of God's absence. Maybe it's proof of a cosmos where freedom is real, dangerously beautiful, beautifully real. And in that freedom, rivers rise, storms stall, and campers don't wake up. But so do rescue workers and weeping parents and love that refuses to leave the debris. Does that solve it? No, this isn't a tidy bow moment, but it might be a start. Because if God is love and love doesn't control, then the tragedy isn't orchestrated. It's mourned. And the miracle isn't in the avoiding, it's in the surviving, the rebuilding, the refusing to let death have the last word. What if the real divine power is in the people who carry each other out of the wreckage? What if God isn't found in the thunder, but in the mud-covered volunteer holding a kid who just lost their sister? What if the holiness isn't in the why, but in the with? So maybe the better question isn't where was God when the river rose? Maybe it's where are we now that it has? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading everything. And maybe this can be a safe place for us to discuss the pain. Thanks for sticking around as we try to sort some of this out. This is Theology Jack, signing off.